Vega 7 was a lonely planet, far from Earth and far from comfort. It was not a place where people smiled. The sky was always dark orange. The ground was dry and cracked, covered with black dust. Huge machines worked day and night digging into the land for valuable minerals. Lance Carter was one of the engineers on the Vega 7 mining colony. He worked long hours repairing power systems, cooling units, and broken machines. His life was simple: wake up, work, eat, and sleep. He didn't have friends here. Most workers kept to themselves. No one had time for anything else. One evening, after finishing his shift, Lance walked slowly back to his small pod room. His legs were tired, and his back ached. He passed through the less-used path near the waste processing zone. Most workers avoided this area because of the smell and mess. But it was a shortcut. As he walked, something caught his eye. Small. Movement, almost like a shadow, near a pile of metal crates. Lance stopped. At first, he thought it might be a small animal or a machine part, shifting in the wind. But then, he heard a faint sound. Cough. He stepped closer, careful not to make too much noise. Behind the crates, in a narrow space, he saw someone. A small figure, curled up tightly. It was not a human. She had pale blue skin, thin arms, and silver-white hair that fell in messy strands over her face. Her body looked weak, too thin, like she hadn't eaten for days. She wore a torn piece of cloth that barely covered her. Her eyes, large and bright violet, looked up at Lance with fear. For a moment, both were silent. Lance didn't move. Neither did the alien girl. Then, slowly, Lance knelt down and opened the bag he carried on his back. Inside was his dinner, just a basic meal pack: protein bars, dried fruit, and a small rice cake. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He gently placed the food on the ground and pushed it toward her. "Here," he said softly. "You can eat it. It's okay." The girl didn't speak. She stared at the food, then at Lance. Her hands shook. After a moment, she crawled forward slowly and grabbed the food. She ate quickly, like someone who hadn't had a real meal in a long time. She didn't care if the food was dry or plain. She ate everything, even the smallest crumbs. When she finished, she looked at the empty wrappers in her hands. Then something happened that Lance didn't expect. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Her lips trembled. She tried to wipe her face, but the tears kept coming. She cried silently, shoulders shaking, but her voice barely a whisper. Lance felt a tightness in his chest. He didn't know what to say. He had seen machines break, systems fail, even fires in the lower tunnels. But nothing had hit him like this. "You're okay now," he said gently. "You're not alone." The alien girl looked at him again. Her eyes were full of emotion: sadness, fear, and maybe something else. Small bit of hope. Lance took off his jacket and carefully placed it around her shoulders. She flinched a little, but then held it close. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she pointed to herself and whispered, "Ilari." He smiled. "Ilari. That's a beautiful name. I'm Lance," she repeated softly. Lance. It felt like the beginning of something important. Lance looked around. If anyone saw them, especially the security team, they might take Ilari away or worse. She didn't look dangerous, but the rules on Vega 7 were strict. Aliens weren't allowed in the human zones without permission. And a hidden alien survivor? That would be big trouble. "We can't stay here," he said. "It's not safe." Ilari looked confused, but followed his movements. When he stood and offered his hand, she slowly reached up and placed her hand in his. Her touch was cold and light, like air. He helped her up. She was weak and could barely stand. Carefully, Lance led her through a quiet path toward the old storage building near the edge of the colony. It hadn't been used in months and was mostly forgotten. He had hidden spare tools and gear there before. Inside, the room was dark and dusty, but it was dry and quiet. Lance pulled out a folded blanket and laid it down in the corner. He helped Ilari sit. Then he lit a small lantern to give the room a soft glow. "You can stay here," he said. "No one comes around." I'll bring food and water. Ilari looked at him, eyes wide. She slowly nodded. Tomorrow, Lance added, I'll bring you something warm to wear? She smiled just a little. It was small, but real. That night, Lance left the old storage quietly, his mind spinning. He had questions. Where had Ilari come from? Why was she alone? Why had no one reported a crash? But one thing was clear. She needed help, and he was the only one who had offered it. The next morning, Lance Carter left his pod early. He didn't take the usual path to the maintenance tunnels. Instead, he walked toward the old storage room near the edge of Vega 7, carrying a small bag over his shoulder. Packets, a thermal blanket, and a bottle of clean water. The colony was still quiet. Most workers were either in the mines or asleep. No one noticed where he went. That was good. He had no plan, only a promise he had made to help a girl who had nothing. When he opened the storage door, he found Ilari sitting just where he had left her. Her silver hair looked cleaner now. She had tried to brush it with her hands. Her face lit up when she saw him. Lance smiled. Morning? She nodded, her eyes watching him closely. He sat beside her and opened the bag. Brought breakfast. Ilari's hands moved quickly, but this time she waited for his nod before taking the food. She ate slowly, more calmly than yesterday. Lance could tell she was still hungry, but she was trying not to seem desperate as she ate. Lance placed the thermal blanket over her shoulders. This will help keep you warm at night. Ilari touched the blanket gently like it was something precious. They didn't speak much. She knew very little English, and Lance didn't know her language at all. But they were starting to understand each other with simple gestures, pointing, nodding, smiling. After she finished eating, Ilari pulled a small metal piece from her. Sida, broken communicator, dusty and cracked. She held it out to Lance with a look of hope in her eyes. You want me to fix this? He asked. She nodded quickly. Lance examined the device. It was old, with wires loose and a cracked chip. He wasn't sure if he could fix it, but he didn't say no. I'll try, he said. Ilari smiled again, just a little. It made Lance feel like he was doing something important. For the next few days, Lance followed the same pattern. He worked his normal shift, then visited Ilari afterward. Every time he brought food, she thanked him with her eyes. Every time he fixed a small part of her communicator, she watched closely, learning. They started sharing words. She would point at objects and say their names in her language. Lance would respond with the English word. Water, he said, holding the bottle. Solon, she replied softly. He repeated it. Solon, she smiled. It was slow, but a bond was forming. A quiet friendship. One evening, a sandstorm hit Vega 7. Winds roared across the colony. Shaking walls and blocking signals, most workers stayed indoors. Lance rushed through the storm, covering his face with a scarf, holding a lantern tight in his hand. He reached the storage room and opened the door. Ilari was sitting against the wall, curled up and shivering. Without a word, Lance pulled off his coat and placed it over her. She looked up at him, surprised. Then she leaned slightly against his shoulder. They sat there for a while, listening to the storm outside. In that moment, words didn't matter. The next morning, after the storm passed, Lance brought a solar charger and attached it to Ilari's communicator. With some luck and effort, he managed to power it up. A soft green light blinked. Ilari gasped. Her fingers moved quickly over the small screen. She pressed a button. Static buzzed. Then a soft voice in her language came through. Ilari's eyes, filled with tears again this time, happy ones. Lance watched in silence. He didn't know what the voice said, but he knew it mattered. She turned to him and whispered, Family, ... maybe. Hear me now. Lance nodded. That's good. Well, keep trying. Later that day, Lance returned to the central colony for work, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. He wondered how long she had been alone before he found her. A week? A month? And what had happened to the rest of her people? That night, he searched the station's restricted database. It took time and risk, but he found something, eh? Report. Short. Cold. A small alien vessel had crashed outside the Vega 7 zone 3 months ago. No survivors found. The report said non-human, non-priority. No rescue mission was made. No further action taken. Lance stared at the screen, shocked. They knew. The colony officials had known about the crash. They just didn't care. Hillary had survived on her own, hungry and afraid. While everyone looked the other way, Lance closed the file and leaned back in his chair. He felt a mixture of anger and sadness. How could they ignore her, just because she wasn't human? Then he remembered her smile, her quiet strength, her growing words. He wasn't going to let her down. Back in the storage room that night, Lance handed Ilari a fresh blanket and a small book with pictures and English words. "You can use this," he said, "to learn more."
She opened the
book and traced the words with her fingers. "Thank, ... you," she said softly. Lance smiled. "You're welcome." Then, for the first time, she asked, "Why help me?" Lance thought for a moment, then said, "Because you needed someone, and I couldn't walk away." She looked at him deeply, as if trying to understand more than just the words. After a long pause, she said something in her language. Lance didn't understand it fully, but the way she said it gently, kindly, it sounded like a word for friend. And in that quiet room, far from Earth, between two people who barely shared a language, a silent bond grew stronger. Lance Carter couldn't sleep. He lay in his small pod, staring at the ceiling as machines hummed softly around him. The report he had read earlier stayed in his mind. The crash. The cold words. Non-human, non-priority. Ilari had been treated like she didn't matter. He sat up and turned on his datapad again. He read the report once more. The crashed ship had no name, no exact origin. Only a short line. Alien vessel, species unknown, no threat detected. Lance felt anger build in his chest. She wasn't a threat. She was a lost girl, scared and starving. Why hadn't they sent help? Why had no one even looked? The next morning, Lance walked back to the old storage room, carrying extra food and tools. The sun was rising over Vega 7, its dull orange light. Casting long shadows across the land, Ilari was already awake. She was sitting near the corner, studying the picture book Lance had given her. When she saw him, she smiled a real warm smile. "Morning," Lance said. "Morning," she replied carefully. Her voice was soft but stronger now. He handed her a new water bottle and sat beside her. "Ilari," he said slowly, "your ship, the one that crashed. Do you remember what happened?" She looked down, silent for a moment. Then she nodded. She picked up a piece of scrap metal and started drawing in the dust on the floor. First she drew a circle, her planet. Then a long line, the journey. Then an explosion. She pointed to the explosion, then to herself. "Crash," she said. Lance understood. Others. He asked, "Were there more people with you?" Ilari's face became sad. She drew small shapes, maybe 6 or 7. Then she crossed them out, one by one, until only her own shape remained. Lance's. Heart sank. She was the only one who had survived. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She didn't move away. He looked at her and made a promise in his mind. "I will help you. I won't let them forget you." Later that day, Lance met with his old friend, Juno. She worked in internal systems, mostly behind security doors and data walls. They had worked together on Earth years ago. Juno trusted him, and she knew how to access information most others couldn't reach. They met in a quiet corner of the comms tower, away from cameras. "What is this about?" Juno asked, frowning. "You're acting strange, ain't you?" "Help," Lance said. "There was a crash. A non-human ship. I need to know more." Juno crossed her arms.
Ow.
"You're looking into alien reports now?" Lance leaned in and whispered, "There was a girl. She survived. She's still here." Juno's eyes widened. "Lance, that's dangerous. If someone finds out, I know. But she's not dangerous. She's just a child. She's alone. Or Juno hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. All right, she said. I'll see what I can find. That night, Juno called him through a private link. I found something, she said. There was more than one report. The first one came from an outer patrol drone. It picked up a signal from a small alien vessel 3 months ago. The drone scanned it and marked it as peaceful. But the second report, that's where it gets bad. What did it say? Lance asked. There was an order from Central Command, Juno replied. Do not respond, do not assist. The reason? Alien presence irrelevant. Resources must not be wasted. Lance sat in silence, his fists clenched. They left them to die, he said, and no one cared. Juno lowered her voice. They even shut down rescue protocols. Someone didn't want anyone to help. Can you send me those files? Yes, but be careful. If they track it back to us, ... I'll take the risk. Back in the storage room, Ilari listened as Lance explained what he had learned. Tried to keep his words simple. People in charge. They saw your ship, but they did nothing. No help. Ilari looked confused at first, then her eyes widened. She covered her mouth with her hands. Double quotes. They. ... Yes, I'm sorry. Ilari sat still, silent, her hands trembling. But after a few moments, she looked up at him. There was no hate in her eyes, only sadness. And trust. Thank you, she said quietly, for telling me. Lance took out the small communicator he had repaired earlier. We can use this, he said. Maybe contact someone, maybe find help. Ilari nodded. Her hands moved across the screen. She tapped a few commands and waited. The signal was weak, but she kept trying. Over the next few days, they worked together. Lance hid supplies in the room. Ilari practiced more English. She asked about Earth, animals, oceans, music. She loved listening to recordings of rainstorms and birds. One evening, she looked up at him and said, Humans ... have heart. Right. Lance smiled. Some of us do. They both laughed, softly, but danger was getting closer. Lance noticed a small drone flying near the storage area. It passed by, slowly scanning. It didn't stop, but it was enough to make his chest tighten. He returned to the storage room quickly. We need to be more careful, he told Ilari. They're watching. She looked worried but calm. I stay hidden, she said. Lance nodded. I'll make a plan. Maybe. Maybe we find a way off this planet. She tilted her head. Together. Lance didn't answer at first. Then he said yes, together. That night, as Vega 7's cold winds blew outside, Ilari sat beside the small lantern, staring at the communicator. A soft light blinked on the screen. A message had been received. She looked at Lance, her eyes wide with hope. Message? He asked. She nodded. My people, they hear me. Lance's heart lifted. A chance. A way out. They were no longer alone in the dark. The communicator blinked softly in the darkness. Ilari held it close, eyes shining. The message was short in her language, but Lance could feel the change in her. She was no longer just surviving. She had hope now. They are coming, Lance asked. Ilari looked up and nodded. My people, far. But they hear me. They try come, Lance smiled. That's good. Just need time. We stay hidden until then. But deep inside, Lance felt the pressure growing. It already broken rules helping a hidden alien, stealing food, digging into restricted files. If the colony officers found out, they wouldn't just take Ilari. They would punish him too. Maybe worse. He needed a real plan. That day, Lance met Juno again. This time, he didn't ask for information. He asked for access. I need to get into the command terminal, he said. The one that connects to the outer beacons.
Aldos.
Eyes narrowed. Lance, that's a security breach. If you're caught, I know, he said quickly. But I need to send her people the exact location of Vega 7. The signal we have isn't strong enough. They're trying to come, but they don't know where to land. Juno looked down, silent for a while. Then she finally sighed. You always had a soft heart. Even out here. She handed him a small device. Use this near the command tower. It will open a back door into the system for 60 seconds. That's all you get. Lance nodded. Thank you. Back at the storage room, Ilari was trying to learn new words. From the book. When Lance entered, she looked up and smiled. I learned this today, she said, pointing to the word trust. Lance looked at the word and nodded. That's an important one. Iliari held the communicator gently. I trust you. He felt something warm in his chest. I trust you too. Then he told her the plan. He would try to send a stronger signal to her people using the colony's own system. It was risky, but it might be the only chance. She touched his arm. Be safe. I will. That night, when the sky above Vega 7 turned dark and the wind began to blow, Lance moved through the colony with care. He wore a repair uniform to avoid suspicion. Most workers were inside now, resting. He reached the command tower and entered using an old passcode he still remembered. Inside, blinking lights and screens lined the walls. He moved quickly, pulling out Juno's device. He plugged it into the main terminal. The screen flashed. Access. Granted time limit. 60 CCONDs. Lance typed fast. He connected Alari's communicator, opened the beacon network, and sent out a precise location ping. He marked a landing zone far from the colony, in a safe valley. The countdown reached 0. He unplugged the device and closed the system. He exhaled in relief. But as he turned to leave, a voice called out, Carter. Lance froze. It was Supervisor Drenner, the head of station security. What are you doing in here? Drenner asked. Stepping into the room, Lance tried to stay calm. Power test. We had some drops in Sector 4. Just checking relay output. Drenner frowned. At night, quieter now? It's easier to run checks? Drenner didn't seem convinced, but after a long pause, he nodded. Fine, just report to me next time. Lance nodded quickly and walked out, heart pounding. The next morning, he went straight to Ilari. They got the message, she said. They send reply. They come soon. Lance smiled, but his joy didn't last long. He had seen Drenner's face. The man was suspicious. It wouldn't be long before he started asking questions. We have to be ready, he said. They might search soon. If they find this place. Ilari stood up, her face serious. I can help. Lance blinked. How? She walked to the back wall and pulled out a panel he hadn't noticed before. Behind it was a narrow tunnel in. Old ventilation shaft? This lead to hill, she said. I used it before, to hide. Lance looked inside. It was small, but passable. We can escape through there if needed, he said. Good thinking. She smiled shyly. That evening, the worst happened. Security bots moved through the colony in pairs. Drenner was leading a team. For unauthorized signals, strange power use, anything unusual, Lance watched from a distance. They were getting closer to the storage area. He ran inside the room. He found Ilari waiting. She already knew. They come. She asked. Yes, Lance said, grabbing a small bag. We leave now. They moved fast, Ilari crawling through the tunnel first. Lance followed, pushing the bag ahead of him. The shaft was tight, dusty, and long. But finally, they reached the hill above the colony. The air was cold, but fresh. From the top, they could see the lights of Vega 7 below. Drones flew across the area. Searchlights flashed. They will find empty room, Ilari said quietly. Lance nodded. But we're safe for now. They moved. Into the rocky valley where Lance had marked the landing zone. It was hidden. With large stones around it and flat space in the center, Ilari checked her communicator. Ship come in one day, she said. Maybe less. Lance sat on a rock and looked up at the stars. I hope they don't find us before then. She sat beside him. They won't. He turned to her. You're stronger than you look, you know. Ilari gave a small laugh. And you, kinder than most humans. They stayed like that for a while, quiet and close. Back at the colony, Drenner stood in the empty storage room. He looked around, then turned to the officer beside him. She was here, he said. She's gone now. Should we alert command? The officer asked. Drenner shook his head. No, not yet. Let's find them first. He looked out across the dark hills, eyes narrowing. They won't get far. But high above the planet, beyond the clouds, the ship was already on its way, and the light it brought was brighter than any searchlight on Vega 7. The sky over Vega 7 was dark, filled with heavy clouds and cold wind. Lance and Ilari sat quietly in the rocky valley where they had hidden. The stars were barely visible, but above them, Alari's people were coming. The communicator showed a blinking light signal from her ship. It was getting closer. They will land soon, Ilari said, her voice soft. Lance nodded. We just have to stay hidden a little longer. He looked at her. Her silver hair blew in the wind. Her face was calm, but her eyes showed worry. They will take you home, Lance said. You'll be safe again. Ilari looked down. Ah! What? About you? I'll stay here, Lance replied. If I go with you, they'll chase both of us. Ilari didn't answer. Her hand tightened around the communicator. Back in the colony, Supervisor Drenner studied a map of the region. Faint signal had been picked up, same type as the alien girl's communicator. It came from the valley near the outer ridge. There. Out there, he said. Send the drones. Full sweep. 3 search drones flew out at high speed. Their red lights scanned the ground below. Drenner followed on a small ground vehicle with 2 officers. He was sure he would catch them this time, in the valley. Lance and Ilari heard the sharp sound of engines. Drones, Lance said quickly. They found us. Ilari stood up. We must go. They grabbed the small bag Lance had packed, water, food, and tools, and began running toward the hidden landing zone. Ilari led the way, moving fast across the rocks. Behind them, the drones moved in closer. Suddenly, a red light swept over the ground where they had been sitting. They're tracking heat, Lance said. We need to split up. Ilari shook. Her head, no, we stay together. They ducked behind a large stone wall. One of the drones flew overhead, scanning back and forth. Lance pulled out a small device from the bag of heat trap. He threw it far away, and it created a false signal. The drone followed it. Good trick, Ilari whispered. Let's go. They reached the flat clearing, the exact spot Lance had, marked as the landing zone. Ilari pointed to the communicator. 5 minutes, she said. They almost here. A sudden blast hit the ground nearby. They turned to see Drenner and 2 guards approaching with weapons. Not drawn. Stop right there, Drenner shouted. Lance moved in front of Ilari. Don't hurt her! Drenner aimed his weapon. Step away from the alien. She's not allowed here. She's not a threat. Lance shouted back. She's just trying to go home. Oh, she's a breach of security, Drenner replied. And you've broken every rule protecting her. I'd do it again, Lance said, standing tall. Drenner's finger moved on the trigger. Just then a loud sound echoed from above. A ship broke through the clouds, sleek and silver. It moved smoothly down toward the ground. Its lights lit up the valley. The wind from its engines pushed dust and stones across the clearing. The guards looked up in shock. Ilari stepped forward. The co-communicator glowed. The ship hovered low and a ramp extended. A group of tall figures stepped out. Ilari's people. Their eyes were bright, their clothes shining like crystal. They moved quickly, but peacefully. Drenner raised his weapon. They're not authorized to land before he could fire, Lance. Tackled him to the ground. The guards aimed at the aliens, but the ship sent out a harmless pulse. Their weapons shut down. The aliens didn't fight. They simply reached out and helped Ilari toward them. Go, Lance shouted to her. Run, Ilari looked back, eyes full of fear. I can't leave you, she cried. Lance stood up, his arm bleeding from the fall. You have to. They're here for you. Tears filled her eyes. But you. He smiled. I'll be okay. With one last look, Ilari turned and ran to the ship. Her people caught her and pulled her into safety. The ramp closed. The ship rose slowly, lights glowing bright. Drenner stood again, furious. You won't get away with this, Carter. What? Lance didn't reply. He simply watched the ship rise higher and higher, until it vanished into the sky. The next morning, the colony was quiet. The search drones had returned. The guards made their reports. Lance was taken to the security station. You helped an illegal? Alien, Drenner said coldly. You broke communication protocols. You used restricted tools. Lance didn't deny any of it. I saved someone's life, he said. You're lucky we don't send you off planet in chains. But something had changed. The aliens hadn't attacked. They hadn't harmed anyone. In fact, several workers had seen the peaceful ship. Rumors were already spreading. Drenner couldn't hide the truth anymore. Lance was suspended from duty. He lost his rank. But he wasn't jailed. Juno helped protect him, and others quietly supported him. You did the right thing, Juno told him, even if the rules say otherwise. Weeks passed. Lance spent most of his time alone, fixing small machines to earn credits. But one evening, he heard a soft knock on the door of his pod. There was no one outside, but a small package had been left. He opened it. Inside was a round crystal, glowing softly with blue light. It wasn't human tech. It pulsed warmly in his hand. A message played inside his head, soft and gentle. Lance, I am home. I am safe. Because of you. You're my light in the dark. I will never forget. Ilari. Lance closed his eyes, holding the crystal close. For the first time in a long while, he smiled. Weeks turned into months on Vega 7. The mining colony was still cold, dusty, and full of noise from machines and workers. But something had changed quietly. People spoke in softer voices about what had happened, about the alien girl, about the human who gave up everything to protect her. Lance Carter lived in a small, old maintenance pod now. No longer an engineer, he took small repair jobs and lived simply. He didn't complain. He still had his hands, his tools, and his memories. Each night, he held the glowing crystal Ilari had sent him. The message inside still played gently in his mind. You are my light in the dark. I will never forget. Those words gave him strength when the world felt heavy, far away from Vigo 7. In a distant part of the galaxy, Ilari stood inside a tall tower made of silver glass. It was her home now, her real planet Irava, where her people had started to rebuild. Forests, rivers, and shining lakes surrounded the cities. It was a place of peace. Ilari had shared her story with her people, about the crash, about surviving, alone, and about the human who had saved her. Many cried when they heard it. Others became angry not at Lance but at the systems that had ignored her. She didn't let that anger grow. Instead, she focused on building a bridge between her people and humanity. She used the data Lance had gathered. The recordings, the files from the station, the evidence. Ilari sent it all to the Universal Council, large interplanetary group. That governed many planets. At first, they didn't believe it. But when more humans stepped forward, Juno among the manned confirmed the truth. Everything changed. Back on Vega 7, Lance was sitting outside his pod when someone approached. A young worker handed him a small data pad. There's a message for you, the boy said. Lance tapped it open. A hologram appeared in the air. It showed the emblem of the Universal Council. Then a soft voice spoke. Citizen Lance Carter, the Council recognizes your actions in protecting the alien refugee known as Ilari of Irava. Your bravery, kindness, and sacrifice have opened a new path for peace and unity. You are invited to the Grand Hall on Earth for the signing of the Array of Human Peace Accord. Lance blinked. He hadn't heard that name in a long time, Mirth. 2 weeks later, Lance stood in a grand hall made of white marble and golden light. Flags of many worlds hung above. People of all kinds stood together, humans, aliens, diplomats, scientists, and leaders. Lance didn't wear a uniform, just a simple black coat and clean boots. But every person who looked at him saw something. Mora, a symbol of what was possible. Ilari stepped forward from the crowd. She wore a long robe of silver and blue. Her eyes were bright, and her smile was wide. You came, she said. I didn't think I'd be invited, Lance replied with a small laugh. You weren't just invited, she said gently. You are the reason this is happening. 8. Stood side by side as the leaders signed the peace agreement. It was the first of its kind an official alliance between humans and the people of Irava. Trade, research, cultural exchange, and rescue aid were all promised. And it all started with one small act of kindness. One meal. After the ceremony, Lance and Ilari sat outside under the sky. Stars sparkled above, and the Earth's moon hung like a lantern. Do you miss Vega 7? Ilari asked. Sometimes, Lance said. It's rough, but it's where I met you. She nodded. I was afraid of humans at first, but you showed me something different. I just couldn't leave you there, starving. No, she said softly. You saved more than my life. You gave me hope. Lance looked out at the stars. What now? Ilari smiled. I want to build something new, a place where humans and my people can learn from each other. Will you help? Lance turned to her. You still trust me with that? You were the first human I trusted. You still are. He smiled. Then yes, I'll help. Years passed. Lance became part of the first joint station between humans. And Iravans, he taught engineering. He helped build ships. But more than anything, he shared his story. Children from both species listened with wide eyes when he told them how he once offered his meal to a starving girl, and how she cried not from hunger but because she had finally found hope. Ilari became a leader. Not a ruler, but a voice of peace and progress. She often stood with Lance in meetings and missions. Their story was told across the stars. Not because of war or battle, but because of a quiet moment of care between two beings who didn't even speak the same language at first. One evening, long after the sun had set on their station, Lance walked out to a balcony. Ilari joined him, holding 2 warm drinks. Still can't sleep? She asked. Too many stars, he said with a grin. Ilari looked at him. Do you ever regret it? Giving away your meal that day? Lance shook his head. It was the best decision I ever made. They clinked their cups together and looked up at the stars, shining now not as cold. Distant lights, but as symbols of everything they had built together.